we're moving forward. You know what I mean? We're moving forward, and the thing is, it's like, moving forward. It's also that idea of like, just like knowing that only the right doors will be opened. You know, and just knowing that, right? Like just removing that whole concept of like rejection or failing or any of these type of ideas. Because I think about like certain skill sets that I have now versus like when I was like earlier, in my development, perhaps certain people could have attached themselves to me. Like I'm just saying, it's just this idea of like, when we think about like we live in like a consumer based society, and we're also in a society that's, is like classism, right? Like there's classism, this whole thing. So this whole idea of like number one, number two, number three, or gold medal, silver, we get like indoctrinated to believe that that's reality. Like there's a winner and there's a loser. But that's like that concept is like, it does exist to a degree, but it doesn't exist in the frame of collective, right? It exists on like an individual basis. Like everyone was given a specific life, right? And a specific set of conditions. And that is the most perfect reality for their soul's correction, right? Like if me and you grew up, like say in the British monarchy, I mean, potentially be, you can order a lot of foods you like, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know, they do some weird stuff over there, but the point is just saying that that life, those challenges would have not done anything for our soul, right? And so the society that we live in like creates this notion where it's like there's this winner and there's this loser and there's this set of judges who determine. It's like this is all indoctrination. This is all brainwashing. This is all removing us away from Hashem, and the fact that each of us are like unique parsufim that are in this world to shine, right? I mean, when we say shine, those lights, those particular lights, we look at different people throughout history, whether they made music, whether they had social activism, or they were a hero in the wars, and so, I'm talking about all cultures, all realities. There's specific lights that that came, that were revealed by communities, different people. Like, you hear a lot of people from the Middle East talk about like their culture, where they came from. And they say like, oh, well, we invented this, we invented that, these types of things. And it's like, wow, that's great, wow, like those people at that time had that light. Anyways, the point is just to say that, we're just, it's just that rediscovery of like what it is to be an expression of light from the Insof, right? Because even when we say human, I want to be a human being, that's not even enough. Because when you describe yourself as a human being, you could denote from that the process of like me, say my body dying is the end of my continuum. I'm a human. I died. No, that's not the way it works. My light will continue on. It may manifest in another lifetime. It may manifest during the resurrection of the dead. But nevertheless, we're on a mission, right? And so this lifetime is something I need to utilize, to get to the next place, right? A higher place. So that's the rediscovery process of like why we, oh my God, like the guy makes 100,000, guy makes 150,000, guy makes 200,000, guy makes 200 million. What you think, because that guy is smarter than the other guy? No, it was a tikkun. It was a tikkun for this guy to have $20. It was a tikkun for this guy to have $20 billion. But in this society, because we deal with everything from an externality, we look at it like, wow, the guy who has $20 billion obviously is more successful than a guy with $20. Not necessarily. Not when you look at the world from the standpoint that we come into this world for correction. Then I have to ask, how did the guy who had 200 billion or 200 million, 200 billion, how did he deal with that 200 billion? How did he deal with the people around him? How did he deal with himself? How did he deal with life? How did he deal with the shim? How did he deal with these things? The guy who was, $20, how did he deal with the shim? How did he deal with other people? How did he deal with himself? That's the victory. That's the victory. Did we crown Hashem on top of it, right? And so this is the work. This is a revolution. This is what we're pushing. We're pushing a redefinition of as an entity, as a soul, as a set of parsufim, and I got to readjust myself into life and say like, okay, hey, well, this is who I am, and I'm saying it's a radical thing because we were always told like you're a race, you're ethnicity, you're a nationality, you're a nationhood, you're a club, you're a group. Okay, very nice. All those things are great, right? But if we go in the world of Parsufim, even the concept of Israel changes, right? Because the concept of Israel is not just like, oh, well, you know what? I had some descendants and, they, really were close to God and they did these great things and revealed all this light. It's like, the Arabs talk about like algebra and, different things they brought to the table in terms of, other forms of mathematics and architecture and these types of things, and whatever but a lot and the British brought innovations, and these people brought innovations, and ancient Asian antiquity brought innovations. Like, okay, very nice, wow, everyone is connected, and the thing about it, we're mixed in with all these things, right? And I'm not saying me as like being a person from America. I'm saying like me as in like like part of this like human race. Like we're so many mixtures in us that we just barely getting tapping into, right? So people are like, oh, well, I'm an Israelite, just okay, very nice. Have you submitted yourself completely to God, right? Every physical body part, right? Everything. Yeah, people talk about circumcision a lot, right? Circumcision is I'm circumcised, blah blah blah. But yeah, but I'm saying that the concept of circumcised was the whole idea of not. It's just not the removal of the foreskin. It's the fact that and that not the child, but the person who in the community of parents or witnesses, they all are doing the mitzvah that was given to Avraham Avinu and was reinforced on Mount Sinai, right? As a community, right? But it really is the whole thing. So it's just like that's a real thing, Like I mean, it's a real thing. Like now, the thing is, like me, my parents were Muslim, right? And so the circumcision is the whole thing and whatever. And so my parents said when I was born, they did like have a ceremony and like people were praying in the room after they did it, whatever, whatever. Now, was it in the concept of Avraham Avinu? I would say so. I would say so. I would say so. But nevertheless, that was in the frame of Ishmael, no? Like what by that, right? So I went and just drew blood, from the standpoint, not me. I mean, there's witnesses, the whole thing. And that was from the frame of Yitzhak and that covenant that's connected to Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Parsufim that we call the souls of Israel that came into this world that have the capacity to bring this tremendous light. That's reality. That's where I'm at. That's me. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to like. I just think it's so corny, like trying to create followers. It's so like selfish, and it's like it shows like a limited level of knowledge. You know what I mean? Because it's like at the end of the day, it's like you want people to be able to go on their own journey. Find it because they're a unique pursuit. Like, I mean, yeah, they could maybe we have combinations that are similar, right? Maybe even soulmates, right, on a certain levels, right? But the point is just saying, like, but nevertheless, that soul has to go on this journey. So anyway, so that's kind of like, when you ask me where I'm at, this whole thing, that's just like the dilemma. It's like building out of that consciousness of anything other than what the creator teaches. You know what I mean? Like, what am I? Oh, I'm American. Oh, I'm black. I'm Jewish. I'm, Israelite. I'm okay. No, all that's great. It's very nice, and if it makes you feel good and it gives you a lot of strength, very nice. I'm a parsiv. I'm a set of lights that is in the neshama that came into a body because of a sin that was created by my ancestors. This whole concept of flesh, all this. Okay, my soul's broken into 613 parts. My body is an expression of these 613 parts, all my limbs, my organs, everything. So the body is an expression of the soul. Crazy idea, but it's true. Then it so happens that my heritage, I took on the commandments of 613 mitzvahs. These 613 mitzvahs correspond to each of the body parts of my soul, each of my body parts and my soul. And then above that is the Shekhinah that governs the world that all the light filters through, right? And that also is broken into 613 parts. So as I use my free will to perform a precept of the Torah, I bring down light that fuels my soul, that goes into my limbs, that connects me to the Shekhinah. That's who I am. Now, you want to tell me different? Like, what do you want me to do about it? Well, you black, and your ancestors were slave, and I'm not bad. The slave thing is a really good look, because the world that made them, enslaved them, is a cruel and evil world, right? We're not talking about like righteous people. You know what I'm saying? You were enslaved by the worst humans in history at a particular time. All right, cool. That's not a bad look, right? They try to make it look like it's a bad look, but it is really not. If they're trying to claim all their justice and free Palestine, all that, bro, that black slave thing is just like just the ultimate. It's the ultimate flex. So no one's mad at that. But at the end of the day, that doesn't describe me because that's a lot of that stuff happened before I was born. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to say that my soul was African American. What 100? Like, am I reincarnated for 100 years ago? Am I reincarnated from 200 years ago? Am I reincarnated for 500, 1,000? When did my soul lived in this reality before, and where am I at now? So if you're trying to say my identity is American, African American, white American, Asian American, Hispanic American, all that's cool, but that's a present moment concept, right? That's a present moment concept. What was my soul before I came into this? Well, I'm African American, we West Africans, a lot of, the Jews, Israelites, they left, Israel, they were some migrating to Africa, boom, boom, and end up in the West, blah, blah. They're tribes, they got mixed in with the natives, and it's a big mess. Okay, fine, but that doesn't mean that's where your soul is at, though. Oh, but that's my DNA, that's my heritage. Yeah, but that's only all those concepts are only there to fuel your ability to correct your soul in this lifetime. It's not necessarily reflective of who you are, but it's rather to induce who you're supposed to be. Right? That's Shar Gaguling. That's those are the laws of reincarnation. That's not me. I mean, I'm not making up any of this, but I'm using other reasoning. I'm just using other reasoning, right? The reasoning that I grew up in K through 12 told me this is who I am, right? That's what they told me. I went to the same junior highs, high schools, the whole thing, right? So that's what they told me. So I've been introduced to other wisdom, and the other wisdom describes me much differently, right? So that's the thing. Like, I mean, okay, like, I mean, you say I'm this way, okay, but I really, bro. I'm speaking about the same concept, Shabbat night, and people are like, this lady says out of nowhere, you're basically saying we're all divine. Yes, figure it out. Let's go. Let's go. Oh, but no, we're a class system. There's rich, there's poor, there's middle class, there's educated, kind of educated, uneducated. There's a rich neighborhood, middle class, poor. These are fancy clothes, average clothes, rags. I'm just saying, this is the world. This is constant indoctrination. They're constantly reinforcing this narrative into this like subjugation. And when I say they, industry dictates your perception, right? So if you're an outstanding person, this is what you do. But people need to stop lying to themselves. When they do stuff, you didn't do it because you wanted to do it. You do it because you saw a commercial about it. You saw somebody else do that. You saw someone else do it. You bought that because you saw someone else buy it. Let's be real. Come on, wake up. Let's go. You didn't buy that on your own volition. You saw someone else, you say, wow, that person looks really happy with that. So therefore I want it too. This is our whole society. Oh, you got an A on your report card. Why? Ah, because you answered all the questions correctly. Okay. Who says I did? I do. The textbooks that we have, they say what's the right answer, what's the wrong answer. So if you say the right answers, you're rewarded. If you say the wrong answer, you're shamed. But it's only the answers that are in this textbook that I'm reading as a teacher that was given to me by the city. And they said this is how the student should answer. So if you answer differently, you're wrong and you're punished. Come on, bro, this makes sense. Damn, I mean, it's like this is crazy to me because it's like if we're into the Simpson, we're into these worlds of the Ain't Soft. We have to remove everything. It's gone. It's gone. This is a new way of thinking. So, anyways, so back to where we're at, right? So we're on chapter 26, and we ended it with chapter 25, in chapter 26. So I thought about it a lot, right? And I thought about like what's the best way to explain this idea and to really make it clear, right? So best way to do it is to continue to teach it. So I had a couple other classes about this after, and the clarity that I got to about it is like this. In essence, the Ein Sof and the Simsun work together in the same way that Keter Til Yesod works with Malchut, right? Because in essence, the Simsun is really Malchut. That's what the Ramchal saying. He's saying it's the expression. The laws of Malchut govern the world of Simsun. As we're in the endless world, Malchut is part of a succession of revealments. So this has the it's like you have the hourglass, so you have the sand goes from one side, but it has to have a bottom in order for the sand to fully manifest from one side to the other, right? Like that's how it expresses itself. On the other side, there's a Malchut there that the other sand goes to, and we determine time in that way. So he's saying that same way. He's saying like no, like Ein Sof is the Aaron pin, or you want to say Keter to Malchut, right? And we Keter to Yesod, and Malchut is the Simsun. What's the Simsun? The Simsun is is like in a way the highest, but also the lowest manifestation of the light. It's that combination of both. Low, as in it's an expression of light as it disseminates from Keter all the way to Keter Chokmah Keter Chokmah Bina Hesed Gevurah Tifereth Netzach Chod Yesod. As it goes through that, right, it's going to a lower dimension, and when it gets to Malchut, it manifests. But at the same time, as in the frame of Malchut, it also is the greatest expression of light because it's its expression, its totality, its full potential, allowing it, in essence, to ultimately return to Keter, right? Because like after the body dies, after the tree falls or whatever, those light forces go back up to the upper worlds, right? So you have that duality of that. So that's the clearest way to do it. Now the thing is, he refers to the entities created in Malchut in Simsun, right? The Simchun as Rishmo. I hope I'm saying it right. Rishmo. I had it perfect yesterday. Someone corrected me, but Rishmo, which is like basically residue, right? And so residue is like, we know what residue is, right? Residue, residue. And so this idea of residue is how is the term that's being used to understand this idea of the expressions of these lights. So like we see an elephant, right? This massive creature, right? But the parsufim that is inside of the light force is the parsufim that make up that elephant, right, are totally concealed to the eye, right? Because those parsufim that make up that elephant are connected to the endless world, right? They're in the endless world, the parsufim animal, we experience it. So the idea is what Ramchal is saying is like that entire element is only the residue of that initial light that is being expressed at that moment. that light that goes all the way back to the endless world, that light, that combination of Hebrew letters, right? That light that goes all the way back to those chambers, 22 chambers, is beyond our logic. So all we're experiencing on the physical world is just the residue. Is the lowest dimension, but also the highest dimension in a certain way. But the point is just saying that that idea is what we're experiencing every day, and he's honing that idea in. So let me before we go, any thoughts, any points, any questions, because I know it's like interesting content.
No, Chief Rabbi.
All right, hold on. All right, okay. Do you guys remember where we left off yesterday? I mean, I kind of do, but I don't know. Yeah.
We were. I know we were talking about the residue and just the whole system of Malkut. So we started at I think 15.
All right, yeah. Okay, so let's do this. So it says Vikim Nim Sa'u Bet Bechayinot Ele Bid Malchut Le Mata. So he says these two aspects are also found in the aspect in Malchut below. For Malchut is a place or a space in the sense of providing the possibility for lower realms to exist. In addition to this, Malchut itself is also the individual root of each one of them because the overall Malchut includes the individual Malchut of all the spheres. So basically, we're basically saying that the Malchut is part of the creative process. How, like say that the seed, right? The apple seeds or the tomato seeds, or the grape, whatever, whatever you want. If you want to see it grow, right, you got to plant it, right? You need a malchut. It needs to be connected to malchut in order to grow, right? And so whether you put the malchut in a jar or some type of pottery, or you put it inside of the backyard, whatever it is, it needs malchut. Or that seed is only going to just be in potential. It could grow an apple. It could grow an apple tree. It could produce other seeds that produce more apple trees. But without malchut, without this manifestation, without the ground, the absorption of that is that. So he's saying that this idea of malchut, understand it from the aspect of space, where the light force can reveal itself. Similar to men and women. So it says, Sheleruv Girulot Lo Haya Mishuga. I mean, Mashga. So Moshga. All right. So he says, so he's going off this point. He says, because it is the supreme greatness, it cannot be apprehended. He said, there's a reason why we call this a residue, even though it is not strictly in the same category as the light of the Ein Sof, which can not be seen, while the light of the residue has in a limit. Uh, okay. So and can be seen. The reason is because there is a way in which they can be considered to come under one category. Since we have called Ein Sof Bazibihi, simply the light of the residue is also light. Since we call the Ein Sof Bazibihi simple light, this is like the Ein Sof. The light of the residue is also the light of the residue is also light. He says they come both underneath the category of light, even though the one cannot be seen while the other is visible. Okay, so he's showing the connection between the lights of the Ein Sof and the lights of the Simsim. All right, since we call the light, we call the Ein Sof, blessed be He, a simple light, Peshat, I guess. He says, Plony, whatever, I don't know. He says, the light of the residue is also light, and they both come under the category of light, even though one cannot be seen while the other is visible. So he says, for we may consider the ability to be seen a contingent occurrence in the residue that could not apply to the first flight. Umi sa'al ze ma sheha kodemenu lelema ala la afilu ka beka besefirot. So he says, and this is supported by the point made earlier in the opening that even in the case of the sphirot, the ability to be seen is not intrinsic to their nature, but was willfully instituted. God made it that way. The Ein Sof wanted the minimal power that constitutes the realms of limitlessness and the boundaries to be. He says, while that which is beyond limits, he cannot want to be visible. Accordingly, we apply the residue to the limited powers subsumed within the limitless power. The supreme will wanted to limit his power to be capable of being seen. Okay, so again, he's going this idea of the light of the Ein Sof as reached the lights of the Simpson and the difference between those lights, but the interconnection between those lights and all these like great things. Sheish ha kashut ein na'ar ne na'ar ne sorry ein ma'ar shema shenis tehilach hu tet. He says one should object. Finally, how can we say that what departed was the ninth sphere? Surely the ninth sphere, surely the spheres are limited, whereas what departed is without limits. And if so, in the category of ninth sphere. Says further, the nine spherot are nine separate functions, whereas in the case of the unlimited, it is impossible to speak in separate parts. If so, what departed was not the ninth spherot, you cannot ascribe the parts to the unlimited. Clearly, there is no difference between one part and another except the virtues of the boundaries that divides them, and whereby the levels of limited and whereby the levels of unlimited and concept of boundaries are not applicable in any ways. If it is so, it is impossible to peak up parts. Let's see what we're holding at. All right, so it says teshuva emet. So the objection may have a following answer. So again, like where are we at right now? So he's asking a question on this idea of the nine spherot, right? Like, what is this idea of 9 and 10, 9 and 1, right? What is this idea? He says, surely the spherot were limited. He says, but as were they departed without limit. So if so, how could it be considered category of nine? So he's saying, like, well, if these nine spherot came in as a parsu from the endless world, when the fact that they came in as nine shows a limitation. So how do we understand this? Is what he's asking. right? He says further, the nine sfirot are nine separate functions, right? So he's saying, whereas the case of the limited is possible to speak in separate parts. So how are you saying this comes from the creator of the endless world if you're saying there's in separate parts? If so, what departed? It was not nine, for you cannot ascribe parts to the unlimited. So he's saying you can't say that there's 10 sfirot, right? You can't say that because the creator doesn't is not broken into parts. You're saying it's an expression. Like, what do you mean? The system. He's questioning the system itself, the 10 sfirot, the whole idea. Clearly, there is no difference between one and the other except the virtue of the boundaries that divide between them, whereby the level of the unlimited, the concept of boundaries is not applicable in any way. If so, it is impossible to speak of parts. Teshuvah emet. So he says of the Sphirot. He says the true objection may be answered as the following. It is true that the Sphirot are limited, while that they departed without limits. From this, the point of view should not have compared what's departed to the Sphirot. So whatever lives in the endless world should not be compared to what's existing after the Simpson. He said it's impossible to compare what was departed, which is without limits, these parts that remain, which follows within the categories of limitation. Nevertheless, the ninth Shfarel, although limited, do give us indication of the unlimited aspect, while Malchut is actually on the boundary. So I think we got that. I think it's pretty straightforward, no? The root of the matter is that the limited function necessary for the entire existence of created realms and beings are in truth nine parts, which constitute the structure of Malchut itself. This is the path of limitation and boundaries that have been subsumed within it. The Ein Sof are discussed earlier. However, the unlimited overwhelm each of the nine, bringing bringing them back beyond the limits, and thus we find the 10 Sfirot, the nine of limited action, Ayid to Malchut, which each individual surah has to Malchut to Hesed, Malchut of Gevor, all having uh, he said there we find ten. He says thus we find here that the ten sfirot nine levels are limited actions, and malchut of each of the sfirot, malchut of Hesed, malchut of Gvur, all having one objective, and is considered as constituting as one sfira, the overall malchut. That's a big idea. Shalitit. Havileti the Techalot al kol asat mehem nichashev lesod. He says the sway of the unlimited holds over each of them. So why is there 10 sfirot? Why is it limited? Because that's the way God made it. And considered as all as considered as the other nine sfirot of Hesed, Gevor of Hesed, and so too in the case of every Sphirot, for the exception of Malchut of each one. So you're saying like if you go to like any of the different levels of Sphirot, they're broken into different breaking blocks, right? You just explain that. You do a lot of it during the Omer, right? But you're saying over by here, from their point of view, they are not divided by the limited by the unlimited holds sway over every part and pathway of limitation and boundaries. It's like a very big relationship part, right? So he says, and at their point of view, they are not divided, for the unlimited holds sway over every part. So nothing's divided. It may seem that way, but it's not. Everything's connected to a show. But the pathway limitation boundaries bring back the limitations as much as the limitations hold sway over these nine sphirot, holding them back beyond the limitations, and they are spoken of as nine of the Ein Sof, but not on account of what they are in themselves. However, the Sphirot after the Zimsun and all parts of Malchut after the Zimsun, we refer. Okay. Um, okay, so everything's connected, right? So he says, however, the Sphirot after the Zimsun, all parts of Malchut are in the Simsun. We refer to as a nine Sphirot, except for the aspect of nine. That's interesting. Like it's a big idea. Like it's like yeah, it's a big idea. He says the malchut of each individual sphere is a pathway of limitations and boundaries, which was subsumed by the Ensof as a hypothetical possibility prior to the Simsun, while the upper nine sphere of each individual sphere indicate the unlimited power whose holds sway over the pathways of limitation. They are not the unlimited in itself, but they give enough indication to him, or they give enough indication of him as it is necessary for the stake of government will be explained in appropriate places. 22. All right, so we're stopping at 22. This is big stuff he's dropping. It's like unbelievable levels of clarity. Um, Elder, do you want to jump in? Any thoughts or reflections?
Yeah, it's just a great appreciation for the whole process itself. I mean, this is like um, analyzing and having an observation of how our soul interacts with creation, and just the whole method of how the Ein Sof, how Hashem has allowed us to manifest and be that a type of, it seemed like a type of malchut within this world itself. You know, as far as in being able to express the restriction, express um, a residue of the light that is given unto us. It's a, you know, it's kind of like we are. He's explaining just how things work in creation, and these methods of and strategies that allows us to become a better vessel, um, and just how the light matriculates down is very very interesting. So the
Yeah, and beautiful, and I think that's a very important point to hone in on. Is like everything that we do as Israel, as we do as Jews, is that we're acting out the mechanisms of the Ein Sof. We're acting as the Ein Sof as to the Simsun and to the purpose, and so that's why we are God's first, fruits. We are God's, primary entity because we are doing the laws of Malchut and the laws of other sphere. We're acting those out in the halacha, in the mitzvot. That's what we're doing here. Otino, you got anything?
Yeah, it's interesting that nine Sefirot, you have Tet being the letter nine, and that's the beginning of the word for good, and it's like Malkut is sovereignty, so it's kind of clicking for me a little bit. I'm not saying I understand it, but it's make a little pathway that the sovereignty is the limitation. So by having concealment, by having limitation, it's showing you the one that created these things is sovereign. Because without the limitations, there is no structure, there is no boundaries, there is no place for creation. Malkut is a space. So the Zoom, like creating a space within himself, allowing the world to exist. So it's kind of just a little matriculation and thought for me. It's kind of It's kind of making a little sense, like why we have the boundaries, why Malkut is actually termed as sovereignty now. It makes a little more sense to me.
Yeah, and also, on that point, it also makes sense why David Melech, right, is connected to Malchut, right? Because he represents all the, like, if you look at his life, what maybe seems like contradictions or things that we may not understand is really expressing different aspects of this world of Malchut, right? And also Mashiach coming out of the, like, Yehuda and that whole process. So that's it. Yeah, what we're getting to is this point of divine worship and the technology to bring the Shekhinah in connection with our neshama and our body and servitude to Hashem, and being able to see the yomim, the days that we have on this 365 process as different experiences of different lights that need to be revealed to correct our soul. So after we hone in and we focus on that and that becomes who we are, then we could come back and, you could talk about worldly things like lineages and all this other type of stuff, and which is nice, but I just, I don't know where it gets us in terms of divine worship, right? Because we're here to correct our souls. We're not here to be A students, right? And so when we talk about divine worship, like, what do I need to remove from my psychology, from my frame of reference to, to be able to, to get to that place, right? Because if I can connect to divine worship, that means that I talk to God directly, and God, me and him have a relationship the same way we have with Abraham. Abraham is not necessarily the goal, as he is the reflection, right? He's a reflection of who we are, right? We are men of that spirit, and when we decide to lead the whole world, we're in that frame of Moshe, right? So this is a frame, divine worship. How do we get, you know, um, to these places, and stripping away, like, what is reality? Am I a Parsufim, or am I nationality? Am I a race? Am I what school and education system has taught me, or am I what the sages of Israel